You don't want it to be too slow. You're trying to make a payment from here, and that payment needs to show in Johannesburg in 3 hours at the very most. So Verto steps in and they say, you know what? We know how costly it can be. We know how slow it can be. So let's help you make payments around the world in minutes, not days, with a better exchange rate and no hidden charges. Verto FX offers you just this real quick. And whether you're an SME, whether you're an importer, whether you're an exporter, whether you're a finance professional, it doesn't matter what you are. It's fast, it's accurate, and with full transparency. 49 currencies, boom, 190 countries there, and a platform designed to keep your business growing all in one place. So why stick with the old ways where there's a new way and it's much quicker and cheaper? All you need to do is log on to www.vertofx.com to find out more information. Today who understands these things about money and the economy, so gets it that you need to get things moving and get them done. And that's the conversation that we'll be having with Bilo Kero this morning, and we'll be looking at Kenya's issues at the moment and what the problem actually is. Bilo Kero is a political economist, and we're looking at a government in crisis. And been here before. Happy New Year, Bilo. How are you doing?
Very well.
You're well?
Mm-hmm.
Good. I'm glad that you're here, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these things around the economy and what the problem actually could be. CT has a proverb, as you know. He's going to share that with you, and then you'll tell us what your interpretation of it is.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Djibouti.
Wow.
Written Djibouti. Okay. Dancing with the enemy. Let me start again. In dancing with the enemy, one follows his footsteps, if counting under one's breath. Follow the footsteps, count them under your breath.
Tough.
Is it? Go for it.
When you're counting under your breath, it's an element of fear.
Yes. Yes.
And it's the enemy.
Yes.
Well, is it the same as what the English would say, watch your steps?
It is. It is indeed. It is. It is. When you say something under your breath, you don't want everyone to hear it.
Of course.
So essentially, it's like you're talking to yourself and probably encouraging yourself. You want to just make sure you're sure. But it is not for the general public to hear, but you know.
And, so and it's out of fear.
Yes. Immense apprehension. Yes. In fact, in most cases, when people talk to themselves,
there's something up.
Something is up. You're not at ease. Something is happening.
Indeed. So, I mean, Bilo, welcome. I mean, even as we look into some of these conversations, we've had conversations with you previously at a time where things, were going in a certain direction, and they seem to have been still hurtling down the hill. That stone is still rolling down the hill, and we've come to a place whereby certain things are happening at the same time, right? KRA still has this huge, target to hit. We're looking at a budget now that is ballooned. The budgeting process began in September, and the CS in the ministry said, these are the numbers that we're looking at now. About 800 billion shillings more than the last budget. We're also looking at a place where, sadly, certain not even recommendations, certain responsibility by government in which, function needs to be followed by money, by funds, has not happened, whether it's at the county level, whether it's at the assembly level, whether it is at ministry level, whereby we see certain things not happening. Education, one of them. Again, health, is enough money going towards making sure that when you go to hospital and get out on the other end of it, that the Taifa Care pays your bill. And a lot of that can be tagged to money. And then there's the huge thing over our heads, which is the debt problem. So, so many balls up in the air at the same time. Let's start by giving an overview of where we are currently. And if there's a problem, what is it?
Well, for Kenya, the answer is a very short one. We always being, I think, for many years now, we're trying to live beyond our means. That has been our challenge. If we were not doing that, part of the issues that we have raised would not be there. And we would not be, for example, focusing on the issue of revenue all the time. I mean, budgets are being done all over the world. It's not the only government that does budgets. But the preoccupation with revenue raising or generation in this country is not shared in many countries, really. Because in most countries, what government focus on is a budget that's balanced. You live within your means. If your revenue is $1 billion, you want to do a budget of approximately about $1 billion. If you got anything from other help from other countries in terms of grants or whatever, that's what people do. And that's what we were doing until almost a decade or so ago. We've always tried to balance. I remember up to the time of Muraria, budgeting was really an art. They had to struggle to try and balance on the basis of revenues that can be raised in the country. But then later now, in the last decade or more, I think what we have seen is a situation where the government says we want to do the budget will be 4 billion. It will be 3 trillion. I mean, it will be 3 trillion, 4 trillion, 2 trillion. And then you are left with now trying to raise revenue to meet that target. And this is unfortunately, I don't know, but there seems to be a sense within the treasury in recent years that you must try and do a bigger budget than last year. You must try and do a budget expenditure bigger than your previous CS. And so even after we have tried to come up with a new constitution that reduced the ministries from what they were during the time of Moi to, in dozens of ministries to 22 to 20, 22 ministries. And all efforts had been made, even at the time of Kibaki, and I think to try and rationalize government ministries. You will find the budgets still growing in every ministry annually. So there is that unfortunate, thinking in government that we must always be the ones to do everything.
May I ask you, when you talk about, so the budgets grow in each ministry every year, if the budgets grow, are we talking about them going towards projects, or are we talking about that budget growing towards recurrent expenditure? Like
see,
salaries,
the thing that concerns Kenyans most is not just the recurrent expenditure. That is about paying the salaries and buying the newspapers for the officers and their flowers and their tea and their travel and those things. But the thing that many Kenyans would look at when a president visits you or a CS visits your area, the things you're looking at is what we call development projects. You want to see more classrooms for your new, class school. You want to get more facilities, more roads, and so that the development is the main thing. And so if you look at our budget, development has not been growing. Now, even when the numbers have grown, the level of absorption is so low that in reality, what actually gets spent is probably half of the budget that has been put in the estimates. So I think the growth that you see really cannot be related to growth in infrastructure in this country. You can't relate it to growth in other other facilities that people really want in real terms. You're not seeing growth in education, for example. Several years ago, universities had easy access to loans, and this was not an issue. Help was running, and things were not an issue. Today, universities are struggling to get their resources. Other facilities are all struggling. The competition for free education was until recently not a major issue. It could delay for a few weeks or a month or so, but it was not a major issue. So suddenly we are in a hole, and we find that we're not running things. And the answers I think you have mentioned, the debt is one of them.
There's been a big debate about the amount of national debt to justify increased taxation, to justify the low amount of infrastructure projects. How do we determine that Kenya is having serious debt issues, and how much debt should we have? Because when I look around, every country has debt, other than Burkina Faso, of course, which solved it. And I'm curious, if Burkina Faso could do it, how hard could it be for Kenya?
Let's get the definition of debt. What is debt? Debt is the budget deficit accumulated over years. That's basically what it is.
Yes.
So when you draw a budget of 4 trillion, let's look at what is happening today, and your estimated revenues would be, say, 3 trillions. What would be your deficit? You are looking at a deficit of 1 trillion. So that automatically means your debt is going to grow by that figure. Never mind how Treasury disguises that figure. It always does. You will never see that difference as being put as debt. They will always, have ways of putting it so that you can't see it. But the reality is the difference between your expenditure and your revenue is the budget deficit. And that deficit accumulated over time, it represents your debt. So we've lived in the difference between us. And by the way, to try and resolve this issue, when we were doing the Constitution, I remember we were in Bomas, and I was the chairman of the technical committee that was dealing with chapters on public finance and so forth, which is now in the Constitution. One of the things that we really wanted was to make it constitutional that Treasury would seek approval of Parliament prior to taking any debt. So that then we would not have a situation where Parliament only rubber stamps a debt that has been taken. Months later, what they call regularization or to ratify.
Yeah.
What we wanted was a situation where every debt that would be taken by government, prior to taking the debt, they must get approval from Parliament.
How did that go?
Well, it didn't go well. But if you look at the Constitution, it still provides very strong provisions with regards to how the government should borrow. But it's being flouted every day because the reason is simple. Government controls Parliament. So you go to, or is it the government travels to, the president and his team travels to, say, South Korea, they'll go to London, they'll go to some place and they will sign on in very beautiful terms, which media never fails to to mention. They call it aid, we got support, those are all loans. Nobody's giving you anything for free.
Yeah.
And so by the time it comes to Parliament, these guys have already signed. The commitment has been made. This is why even when they have not drawn on that money, you find commitment fees being paid, and audit always flagging, billions that have been paid in commitment fees for loans that have not been utilized.
So is Kenya in loan distress?
Well, it's not. I think if you look at where we were when this administration came to power in 2022, and today, no, I think we are in a better situation. I mean, that was the time when we were grappling with the Euro bonds, the billions will we default. Are we going the Ghana way, the Zambia way?
Yeah.
People were really worried. Well, I think it did. I think it did stabilize significantly, I would say. They say give the dog his due. They have handled that bit. And so we are not in distress in that sense. And some of the, if you look at some of the macroeconomic statistics, things seem to have been stabilized. For example, I'm in business, in manufacturing. Some of the challenges we had were in the forex. We reached a point where we were buying the dollar at 168 to import raw materials. In the last 1 year or so, things have stabilized at 129, 130.
Okay.
Inflation was another major issue. I think that was really, that came from the previous administration, which also seems to have stabilized. But I think that does not mean that the economy, for me and you or the folks down there, suddenly we're
I'm interested as to the markers that were then applied to ensure that kind of stability then was achieved. What would you see that was done, or did the market find a way to balance itself? What happens that you would then see, for example, exchange rates dropping in the manner in which they did? I mean, by easily 30 points. What would be done? And I ask this as you answer that so that we can understand that if it can be done once, it can then be done regularly. What are those?
No, I think for a number of the policy measures that the government has taken. One, for example, the one that they took to address the issue of inflation, I think was clear. The Monetary Policy Committee in the central bank, reducing the liquidity in the market. And this, I think they really kept on raising the rates of interest rates to the extent that then the inflation went down completely. And this is why you find the rates of interest were high. And it's a measure that you find many of these countries have done when inflation was getting out of hand in many of the Western countries. But today, the issue that they're all grappling with, like Kenya, is now how to deal with the interest rates to try and moderate. The same thing now with the forex. I think there was during the time of Uhuru, there was a borrowing, borrowing spree,
Yes.
really, where we were borrowing a lot of money. But then the issue is not about the borrowing. The issue is when you are repaying, you need dollars. So with the government and the private sector, everyone's struggling to get the dollars to try and pay. I think that was one of the major issues. The second was, I think, the other issue that the government handled was on the petroleum. I think that deal, despite the many other issues around it, the issue of getting them, the petroleum dealers or the marketers paying in Kenya shillings, immediately they import.
Yeah.
And then the government dealing with the dollar aspects later. I think this also did reduce the demand for dollars in the market significantly. I remember we were always fighting for dollars in the market with the petroleum people in the banks. Because of the demand for import. Oil is the largest. So then I don't think there were any other. It's all about the monetary policies in the central bank, plus that particular deal on petroleum. There's nothing else the government has done in terms of increasing in export, which would have brought in more money. The only other thing that has happened, which I want to mention, is that the imports also did reduce. You know what happened is that when the cost of raw materials, so the cost of import becomes higher, then the amount of imports that come into the country was declining. There was a time when there was a lot of talk about people moving to Tanzania. Tanzania imports are booming and Mombasa port is not, and the government was saying no. But the reality is that the imports in Kenya was getting reduced, one, because of the high level of taxes. When you try to bring in your things through Mombasa, it was much more expensive, and people would find it cheaper to take it to Tanzania and then find their way through the borders to the country. So I think so those are some of the measures that I've seen the government take to try and address.
Okay.
2025, 2026 economic year, should the government increase taxes, keep taxes as they are, and how will that affect in real terms the business environment and our own pockets as citizens? I like how he's smiled as though it was. I'm very serious.
No, you are. But this issue of taxes, I don't know what's wrong with this government. I mean, every Kenyan has voiced concern about taxes. True, the government took over huge debt and they need to pay their debts. And they need to, to pay for their bills, the medical education and all those things. Yes. But I think the government needs to be alive to the fact that, look, never mind what the people did before and messed up the country, Uhuru and those before him, but there's a level to which you can tax people. And beyond it, then you're going to affect the businesses, you're going to affect the pay slips, you're going to make people poorer, really, in the sense that if today, I can tell you for sure, if they do a poverty assessment today and compare it to 2022, I am sure that the situation would be worse than it was in 2022. Because of what's happening in terms of making things more expensive for people. So I think taxes for me is not the only way the government can run a business. And we have taken the example of housing. When this government came up with the housing levy thing, we told them, look, why must the government be building homes and houses? Everybody else in the private sector can do it. There are so many banks, flush with money.
Yes.
All of them have got institutions that can build for them houses. Why would the government be interested in this? Why don't you provide incentives? Incentives to the government, to investors, to those who want to build in the real estate. They go ahead and build houses. The government doesn't need to tax people. So there was a time when NAC came to power. That was the two things that we came up with at the time. I was in the official opposition at the time. And I think one of the things that we supported the government at the time in was that, one, they were going to reduce direct taxes, taxes on payroll, and go for indirect taxes, which would be a bit more equitable. Because if you walk to a shop and buy a bottle of water, everyone would pay same amount of VAT on it.
Yes.
There'll be VAT on it. It's an easier way of, getting tax out cover, the coverage to a larger population than on the direct taxes only affecting those people who have got payroll, who have got pay slip.
Yes.
So that was the policy that the KNAC came in with. They said we will focus more on indirect taxes and reduce direct taxes. The other was to try and get government out of business. Let's try and reduce government presence in activities. Everything government was investing in through state corporations in everything from running taxis to slaughtering chicken to to hotels. And they try to divest from hotels. They try to divest from so many of those things. But it's still the government is largely involved in many things. But instead, you will find still government trying to go into things that they shouldn't. And this is why all these taxes issues keeps coming up. You're making the government bigger and bigger, and you need resources to run government. And so I would say, yes, true, they took over tax and they took over a lot of the problems. I mean, so debt and a lot of problems. But tax is not a solution. I think there are ways in which you can address some of the challenges we have in this country without necessarily raising taxes, and certainly not taxes on payroll.
On payroll. All right. We're going to take a break at this point. Political economist Bill Okero is our guest this hour. We're looking at some of these issues around, so cash crisis, what exactly is the problem? So if you do have a little bit of it, CT, what can you do with that to make sure that your mortgage is intact?
Take this, for instance. Just give it a thought. Yeah? Someone tells you that they will offer you 105% loan. And you think 105, yes, 105. They're saying it doesn't really matter whether you have a pay slip or whether you have a business or whether you're in the diaspora. And they're saying why this is possible is because we, as Diamond Trust Bank, have partnered with the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. So the interest rate that we are likely to charge you will be 9%. But that is fixed. It's not going anywhere. It's 9, okay? If you borrow up to 10 years. If you want to borrow up to 25 years, then it'll be 9.75. And they're also saying, look, some of these things may seem impossible, but we are saying nothing is impossible because this is a Kenyan bank, we are in Kenya, and these are details you can actually come and verify with us. And all you need to do is very simple. Either visit the nearest Diamond Trust branch or email mortgages@diamondtrustbankafrica.com. That's it.
That's all you need to do.
That's it.
It's 28 minutes to 10. These conversations continue when we come back from this break.
Do you want some sugar? How about some spice?
I'm back with a little sugar and a little spice.
Get ready to indulge in the perfect blend of sweetness and sass.
Buckle up and let's have some fun because life is hard enough.
Sugar and Spice is back, and it's a little sweet and a little spicy.
The event that you work for a company that doesn't have any stringent measures on office romances, then what do? Take the plunge? Why do many ladies like dating older men? You believe that once a cheat, always a cheat? It's not as easy as it seems. It's not.
Tune in every Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
This is 94.4 Spice FM. You're tuned to Sugar and Spice with Yolanda Mulwal for everything fun, funky, and fresh.
Only Digo Double G.
when certain things are not done, and one of the, I mean, it sounds like it's overdone and oversaid, but I think it is extremely important, especially for budgeted items. Now, when we look at the budget, which again we are in the process of doing for 2025, 2026, that there are certain items which are very clear. The CS will come to Parliament in June, July, and he will say that this is the amount of money that we are budgeting for this. This is the amount of money that we are budgeting for the other. Education is one of them, 600 and something million shillings. And probably every now and then it does up and down a few points, but that's around the amount that we talk about. Takes, one of the big ticket items on the budget. But for some reason, at any given time, there's always a delay in the funds that then should go towards education. At a fiscal treasury release point of view, what's the problem? And I don't know if it's the same problem that we see release of money to counties, for example, or release of money for certain projects. Should you see that money should not be released when you are dealing with budgeted items? What exactly happens there?
All right. When you make a budget, and one thing is an estimate. The revenue side is an estimate. You're not sure you're going to get all of it. That's one. Two, after you make the budget, you prepare an appropriations act or bill. That would explain how you are going to spend this money in detail. Now, the thing to address the question you are raising, there's always one thing, an elephant in the room, what we call, I always refer to it as misplaced priorities. What happens is that when it comes to now releasing money, the exchequer, then there are always priorities that Treasury or whoever is dealing with the disbursements of money will be looking at. Priorities. And this is where a number of factors come in. One of them is political patronage. If you are a CS, and this happens, it's not only for this government, it has been happening in all this government. There's a CS who is so politically correct that his money must be released. And there's another one, is like Bilo, he's not well known, he's not very powerful and whatever.
And he says things the government doesn't like.
And he's not doing things that the boss doesn't like. And so he's released, he struggles to get a checker for his ministry or for his department or for his corporation. So apart from the fact that, yes, revenues may not flow in the way it was budgeted, the reality is that the exchequer releases are always determined by, one, these misplaced priorities play in always. What happens is that for one department where you had budgeted 5 billion, another 5 extra is spent, 10 billion. So that 5 has to be drawn from some other, some other appropriation. That happens quite frequently. The second, of course, then is the basis on which the money is being released. There was a time when I think under Uhuru it reached a point that for the counties, some counties would get their funds released, and others had their money delayed, and it became an issue. So that's why I'm saying it's sometimes the priorities. But we have an office to deal with all this. It's called the control of budget. The reason why we created that office is to deal with the implementation of the budget. The budget has been done by Parliament. Appropriations approved. Everything. Now it's up to that officer called the control of budget to determine that government Treasury must spend according to that document.
Hang on. Sorry.
That's where the catch is.
Sorry, Bilo. So what we are saying now, so when there are delays to county, when there's delay to Ministry of Education, when there's delay to health, whatever the case may be, are we saying that the control of budget at the beginning should say, excuse me, we budgeted this thing, folks. This is the money that we release for 1, 2, 3. Should she now that it's
the
she in that
controller
office do that?
should raise her finger the moment she realizes that Treasury is disbursing money to an activity that has not been budgeted. One, which happens quite frequently, and they always talk about it months later. Two, the moment money is released to certain ministries or departments or whatever, over and above what has been allocated, primarily because that office is critical or that office is more politically correct and so forth, and they can access more money and deny others. So if that's why they're dealing with implementation of the budget. They can raise the question you asked. Yes, they can raise the flag and say, look, Treasury, disburse the money, because they're the ones who will say, disburse this money for the counties that's been approved. They get the returns from counties. They verify and they know how much is supposed to go. And there is a schedule approved by the Senate. I said this money needs to be released. But quite often what happens is controller releases a report after the event. 3 months, 6 months later is when they'll publish a report.
Why would that be?
Well, the law says they must submit a report. So they do submit a report. But the law does not stop them from getting involved real time. It doesn't. They can. They should actually be, in coordination with the ministry, the treasury, to find out that, to ensure that the exchequer is released based on whatever appropriations have been made. But they don't. And then the sad thing about the controller is they have the capacity to say, no, you have not spent money according to the budget. So you cannot get, don't release this money, because these people, particularly in counties, happens quite frequently. Money is released to them for construction of this building, but they get it and they put some other project. Then the next time again they'll come. The treasury controller should be able to tell them, no, sorry, I can't. We gave you money last year for this building. Where did it go?
Okay.
Pending bills right now running into nearly 800 billion Kenya shillings. What is the impact of this on the economy? And can the government realistically be able to pay back this money?
The impact on the economy is huge. Look, that one, I think there's no denying the fact that the impact is going to be pretty huge, because all those people who had given, it's like giving a loan to the government, and they're not getting their money back. It affects their operations, it affects their businesses, their investments. There are companies that have folded because of the delay. There are companies that cannot execute their projects because of the delay in getting their money. So it has huge implications. And and the stimulus impact of it. Imagine if that money was released to the economy today and everybody got his money. The impact on the stimulus impact on the economy is going to be pretty huge, and they will see it. The government can actually see the numbers of the growth affected by that kind of an injection into the economy. But is there no other way of paying? Yes, there are many other ways of paying. The government did come up with the issue of a bond to try and pay off that. I mean, every day they're signing into bonds for this project and that project. They're worth billions. They can get a long-term facility that can be used specifically to release this, because the dividends would be visible very fast. If the moment you get these people, give them back their money, that money will go back into the economy and people will start investing that money. And so I think they did come up with it. I don't know why they have not gone through. They started, paying off some people, particularly in the petroleum sector. You remember there were some bonds and so forth. But at some stage, again, it seems to have stalled. But they can. The only way they can do is to borrow through bonds and pay off. It's not likely this government, particularly this administration, to try and say, look, out of the 3 trillion that we want to raise in revenue, let us give 1 trillion to clear the old the debt. They would not be willing, because of the simple political fact. Government is politics. Budget is a political instrument. They want to be seen to be doing something. The money that goes to you to pay your debt is not something that they can say tomorrow, I paid this guy's debt.
Yes.
They would rather say, I built this classroom and we built this road. They want something that they can go and sell, and get some politics out of it. So it's not a priority for them. Thirdly, I think they would also say that it's not me who took that debt. So during Kibaki's time, it was Uhuru's time. Why should I pay? That is very, very apparent in counties. The reason why county debts are not being cleared is because a governor comes in and says, it was not me who took that debt. And I get nothing out of it.
And that's not my priority right now.
And I don't get anything out of it. The guy who earned some kickbacks out of it was the previous governor. I'm not paying.
There are those who've said that if they were to sum up the problems that we have, they say it is fiscal discipline or the lack of it.
Correct.
Is that an oversimplification of our problem?
It's not. Fiscal discipline means government living within its budget. That's basically what it means. So if there's fiscal discipline, one, there'll be no expenditure. there'll be no this issue we're just discussing now of pending bills. And there'll be no political patronage. There'll be no misplaced priorities. People would be doing things exactly as per the budget that has been approved by Parliament. The lack of it is what is putting us where we are. The second thing about the fiscal discipline is that the Constitution, the law is very clear. The Public Finance Management Act is clear how much money should be spent on recurrent expenditure, how much should go to development expenditure. Fiscal discipline would mean if 35% of the money or 30% of the money must go to development, it must be spent on development. Fiscal discipline means the law is clear also on the PFM that when you borrow for development.
Yes.
So we will not have a situation like the Eurobond. You took $2 billion and nobody knows where it has gone. So fiscal discipline would really make life. So it's a simplification, but it really addresses the key challenges, which then creates all these problems we're having. The public debt, and all those things are a failure of financial discipline.
So who's the one that is to enforce fiscal discipline?
The president.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you why. The buck stops with him.
Why?
He appoints a guy called CS Finance. CS Finance has got huge powers under the Public Finance Management Act. He's the one who appoints every other officer in government as an accounting officer. And he's the custodian of public resources, provided for in the Constitution. They're the ones who can say, look, you are the CS Health, you have not accounted for your money properly, I am not going to, you're no longer the accounting officer for the ministry.
It's an executive office.
It's an
Yes,
executive, of course.
Yes, yes, finance is
So
an executive office.
Treasury, with all those powers, cannot act because everyone else whom he is supposed to act on, all those accounting officers have been appointed by his boss. So to some extent, then they are all in the same level. So then Treasury would not want to implement the PFM Act because of fear that this guy was also appointed by the president. I cannot just stop him from being an accounting officer. I cannot simply freeze resources to his department. But the law is very clear. If you look at Public Finance Management Act, all the provisions relating to penalties for financial breaches, including financial indiscipline, all those powers are with the CS Treasury.
Yeah,
So
the CS Treasury is actually what do you call it? He's not just a policy holder. He actually has implementing powers. I think the only one in cabinet actually who does, right?
Yeah, so you need a finance CS who can exercise some level of independence and is concerned about the financial indiscipline. You cannot allow a ministry to spend more than has been allocated for it, or to to spend money on areas that have not been appropriated for. And it happens every day, and no action is taken.
There's something that often happens in government when you talk about debt. There is always this conversation about proper invoicing. How the invoices that are with the government, you may put a figure to it.
Yes.
But do they meet the master that then guarantees that you will be paid? It's a conversation that has been had. That's one. Then there's the question of what percentage of these debts are big businesses and which ones are medium or small enterprises? I'm asking this question because there are those who say that 95% of most of these debts that we speak of fall between in the range of medium and small enterprises. So it means what we've long considered to be the very engine that moves the commercial sector or even industrial in this country is where this money is owed. So if they are starved of it, it therefore means that any growth that we may think of will not be
Will
forthcoming.
not happen.
And it's pretty obvious. Look, if you are a small or medium-sized enterprise, you do not have the political leverage to pursue your money. But if you're a multinational company or a big, contractor, you'll get your money. You will get your money one way or the other. You have the means to get your money. But if you are small or medium-sized enterprise, it's a local Kenyan company, it's not going to be easy for you to get back your money. And so that's why that is 95% of them fall into that small, medium-sized companies. And this is why you'll actually see people who have shut down their businesses because the government did not pay them for the last 4 or 5 years.
Is there enough floating around, essentially, to have government do what it's budgeted to do and on time? Is there enough? Or is government still grappling, struggling to look for the extra, collecting more in order to have that happen? Can
It's
you
not
get
for
through
lack
a
of
year?
enough.
So what's the problem?
No. Look at it. This issue, by the way, because I was a shadow finance minister during the time of Kibaki.
Yes, you are.
It's been there from the time of Kibaki. I mean, it's a question of not lack of it. I've told you, it's a question of priorities. When it comes to releasing exchequer, you want to release money to some particular department or ministry that you want, and that one will get the money because there's something else that they're doing that you are interested in, or the executive is interested in. So it's not for lack of it. Even if you give them all the money, there will still be challenges in allocating on giving you the exchequer, because they will sit down and suddenly, in a year is a very long time, and priorities change. And boss has traveled to Mandera and he's been told, we want this thing done, and the boss has taken a pledge.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it done, and he'll come here and call that CS and tell CS I put something for that activity.
Yeah.
He has to find it, and the only way you can find it is take it from him or from another. And
let me ask this question, because the thing is, I think government has institutions that basically ignore and flout the rules. But my question, as you keep talking, is how can I be rich again? If in 2022 I was doing well.
This is a Mark question.
No, it's a Kenyan question.
I'm joking.
Yeah, but actually it's a Mark question. I would like to be rich again.
Go with it. All right.
Because Mark is a Kenyan.
Yes.
Because Mark is a Kenyan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, I would like to be rich again. We've talked about the macroeconomics and things like that, but we've honestly felt the pinch in terms of how we are spending money, our spending ability, our earning ability, even the amount of business we're able to do has somehow slowed down. How can the Kenyan go back to financial freedom and gain back what they seem to have lost over the last 2 years?
The role of government is to create an enabling environment for you to make money. That's it.
Say that again.
It's you see, when that environment then has not been created for our businesses, for Kenyans to grow their own economy, to grow their own businesses, then the situation that we are in now is what will happen. So we have a situation where government policies are not conducive to that business environment. And one of the examples, the simplest example is tax.
Yeah.
The more you tax people, then the less likely it is good for you to do some business, because you take calculator and you find, no, I can't sell these phones. By the time I import them and I pay VAT and I pay duty, I pay excise, I pay this, I pay that, you cannot take it to the market, because then your sales will be affected.
Yes.
You will be forced to shut down. You can't even pay your rent. So government policies must be created to create a better enabling environment for me and you to work. That's essentially what we're supposed to do. But when the government gets the wrong end of the stick, instead of doing that, they want to create an enabling environment for the government to make money. And so it's bring the money. We know how to spend it. You don't know how to spend it. This is unfortunately what our executive has ended up doing, and so unfortunately then you can't get richer in a situation where the policy environment is not conducive to you growing your business. And I'll give you an example. Look at a small Safaricom, say M-Pesa thing you want to start in Nairobi. Try and see how many licenses you'll get. You'll get shocked
at the number.
Yes.
How many?
How many documents, licenses you have to get, and
in order to operate that kiosk.
In order to operate that little thing, and that happens across the board to everyone who's trying to get into business. So I think we are not making things easier. I'll give you another example. I mean, we are trying to import. This is something that really we are trying to import some goods from outside the country, and that manufacturer in that country exports to 100 other nations of the world. So we are told then by KEBS here that you must get approval by the appointed surveyor. It's called SGS and so forth.
The quality.
They must do a pre-shipment inspection in that country. And so this company then, what they do, because they export to over 100 countries, they prepare one inspection every year,
Yes.
where they have their products analyzed by a lab, a
Yes.
recognized lab, and then they have that one report that they now share with the surveyors for all the other all the countries.
Correct.
And then here we're told, no. You see that report, Kenya, what we want, our country, our KEBS, we want another test done, ABCD. But those guys say, what do you mean? These are the tests we're doing for all the countries in the world, and they're all the
And it
necessary,
meets all those standards.
and they meet all the standards that are required globally.
And
No. So I'm telling you, 6 months now from August, we're struggling to try and get approval between that KEBS. How can you do business?
But
How can you do?
aren't the standard
It's impossible.
bureaus
They make
in
things
the
so
world
difficult.
connected? Aren't they connected? Because even for us to export, the Kenya Bureau of Standards stamp on your product is acceptable in Tanzania, because all these standards, it's not that they work in isolation.
Another example. There was a time we imported some products. It's small products like sweets and chocolates and things.
Yes.
These things would come in cartons. In your container, they would come in cartons. And within those cartons are packets. And in those packets then are
Wrappers.
individual wrapped.
Yes.
Now, the requirement for...
I can see where this is going.
Wait, the requirement for the government, when you are paying the duty at the port, this duty, not customs duty, but excise duty,
Yes.
they want each stamp of the excise duty to be stamped on the individual products.
Jesus.
So you will get your container. If you are importing, imagine 2, 3, 4, 5 containers. You have to get all those things out in your warehouse. Get all those boxes, the cartons opened, and all those packets to try and get all those things.
The individual suite.
So
Yes.
this week, I'm telling you, and this, I'm not exaggerating. Even this week, we got a letter from the Kenya, from the Competition Authority. They said, you guys, the sweets you're selling, the individual one, it doesn't have the date of manufacture and the date of expiry on the sweets. So I told them, there's no one who's manufacturing anywhere in the world. On the individual, they do it in the packet. It's on the packet. They said, no. We want it on the individual piece. So when we went around, I found that every manufacturer in Kenya, all of them, none of them is putting those dates on the individual piece. They are on the packets. So now, you make things so difficult. That's what, when I'm talking about creating business environment, making things much more difficult for you.
That's what we're talking about.
Do you have another different of sweets than the one we do? Because if a sweet is that tiny, where is the space for manufacturing?
Not only that, but look at the cost of you doing that. Somebody's asking
Mark,
you. It will be making things more expensive.
Ask the question. This is institutionalizing obstructionalism. Because that's what you're doing.
Yes.
And making it expensive also.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no. It's deliberate. Somebody sat here and asked the question, or rather raised the issue and said, if the Treasury was independent, some of these problems may not be there. Was he sort of like pontificating on something that is not realistic, or is the independence of the Treasury something that could actually change very many of the things we're talking about?
Well, in some countries, they have some independent treasury. If you go to Canada, they call it the Treasury Board.
Yes.
It's independent from the executive, and it's kind of is a team, so that it's not an individual who just does what he wants to do. But in the public service administrations I have seen in many countries, I don't think there are many countries with an independent treasury, because treasury is the nerve center of government, and there's no executive who wants to run
Have it run on its own,
control
exactly.
of that nerve center of the government. Because what is government is all about that resources, so they would not want to let go.
It would be difficult.
But if there was, in the case of in Canada, that treasury board is the one that determines, and they're independent, and so the government cannot say, do this and do that, and you can't call an executive president cannot call the treasury CS and tell him, my friend, is coming to you, 10 million. Equal campaign. It can't happen.
These are conversations, and I mean, and it's always a breath of fresh air to have you with us below, and necessary for us to keep looking at some of these issues and look at the way in which we need to go. So thank you for being here this morning. Political economist Bill Okero has been our guest this hour, and it's time for me to remind you, even as we come to a close, that you know what, Kenyan businesses, we get it. Dealing with international payments doesn't have to be complicated, but traditional payment methods make it feel like an uphill task. So with Verto FX, you get a seamless, hassle-free way to send and receive money from anywhere in the world. You get competitive exchange rates, check. Fast transactions, check. Secure CBK-approved transactions, check. 49 currencies in 190 plus countries, check. All you need to do is check www.vertofx.com. We talk again tomorrow. Good morning. It's 10 a.m.